Hey guys, welcome back to Online TESOL. Now we're going to get started on Module 3, Lesson 5, Asking Questions. Alright guys, but before we really get into this lesson today, we got to take a look at our aims, of course, right? So we've got, again, 3 aims, and our first aim of today's lesson is that we're going to focus on some basic types of questions and how we can use them, right? So, sounds pretty basic. Getting into our second aim though today, we're going to be taking a look at something called real classroom questions. And then after that, we're going to look at something that's a little bit hard, and it's going to be called eliciting. And if you don't understand what that is right now, don't worry too much, you're going to understand it a lot better later on. Okay, and our third aim for today's lesson, guys, is something called questioning strategies. We're going to take a look at this thing called questioning strategies, and I think this is really interesting because this is not about different types of questions that you ask students. This is about how you ask students questions. So actually for me, I find this very interesting. There's a little bit of psychology mixed into it. Anyhow guys, I know yesterday I was wearing a suit. Today I'm kind of dressed down a little bit casual, but let's not take this class too casual. Let's get started. Okay guys, so in activity 1, we're going to be taking a look at different types of questions. So let's take a look at those questions. Now you guys have this in your book, but let's take a look at it together. Alright, so we've got 3 different types of questions in A, B, and C here, right? I'm going to go over these questions and I'm going to try to answer these questions honestly, just like if my friend were asking me these questions. Alright, so taking a look at A, we've got 4 questions, and the first question here is, do you drink tea? Alright, so if my friend Brian asked me, like, hey Alan, do you drink tea? I'd probably respond by simply saying, yeah, sometimes. Why do you want to know, Brian? Like, but okay, all right. Anyhow, that would be my honest answer. Let's take a look at the next question. We've got, can you swim? Yeah, of course. Why couldn't I, right? Okay, after that, we've got, did he go to university? I don't know who he is. Let's assume we're talking about another friend of mine. Yep. Done, right? And the last question we've got in A here is, are they coming to the party? Nope. No, they're not. Okay. Now, if I'm answering these questions honestly, I'm going to give a pretty short response, right? And I think that's pretty natural. I'm trying to answer these questions as naturally and honestly as possible. Okay, so those were responses to the questions in A. Let's take a look at the questions in B, and again, I'm going to try to give you an honest answer here. So in B, guys, we've got, do you prefer tea or coffee? Coffee. I definitely prefer coffee. Okay, the next one we got here is, are they brothers or just friends? Who are they? I'm going to say they're brothers. Yeah, they're brothers. Okay. Alright, or will you walk or go by bus? I'm gonna walk because I'm cheap. That's what my wife says anyhow. Okay, and the last one here is, did she study in Britain or the United States? If I'm talking about my friend from from Scotland, I guess she studied in Britain. Okay, so those are the questions in B. As you can see, they're kind of giving you options, right? A or B, A or B, A or B. And I tried to answer them honestly, but again, the answer was not too long, it was pretty short. Anyhow, let's take a look at the questions in C. The first question we got here is, what do you usually drink? What do I usually drink? Probably water or coffee, which is, the coffee part is not good. I think the water part is though, but anyhow. Alright, the next question we got here is, where did she study? I don't know who is she, but I guess she studied in the United States. Let's just say that. How long have they known each other? Oh, I think Brian and Sarah have known each other for a pretty long time. Yeah, maybe a couple of years. Okay. And when are you leaving? I'm not sure. I'm leaving whenever I'm supposed to. Okay. Alright guys, so those questions in C, they kind of forced me to give a longer answer, right? So all these questions are different, and we have different names for these kind of questions here. So the questions in A, B, and C, let's take a closer look at them and think like, what might they be called, especially the ones in A. So think back about those questions in A. Do you drink tea? Can you swim? Did he go to university? Are they coming to the party? Now they all required a very, very, very short answer. And when I was answering them, I usually said yes or no, yes or no, right? So of course, what we call these questions, and you probably already know what we call these questions, but we call them yes, no questions. Pretty simple, right? Okay, now I do want to talk about these in a little bit more detail afterwards, but I want to go through the titles for each question type first. So let's take a look at B, guys. Now just quick reminder, do you prefer tea or coffee? Are they brothers or just friends? Will you walk or go by bus? And did she study in Britain or the United States? So what do you guys think? What might we call these questions? Now what is the similarity between all of those questions? You've got an option. A or B, C or D, tea or coffee, whatever, right? So if you guess that we call them or questions, you are right. Seems pretty simple, right? Now, instead of or questions, if you want to make it sound a little bit fancier, a little bit more formal, we can also call them alternative questions. And the reason why we call them alternative questions is because the person who is receiving the question is being given an alternative or a preference, right? Okay, guys, last type of questions here, just to quickly recap. What do you usually drink? Where did you study? How long have they known each other? When are you leaving, right? So we've got what, where, how, when. Okay, so I'm pretty sure you guys can guess what these are called. These are called WH questions. And we can also refer to them as information questions. Okay guys, so we went over the basic names for these different types of questions. I want to briefly talk about them in a little bit more detail before we move on to the next activity though. If we're thinking about the yes-no questions here, a lot of teachers don't like these kind of questions. Why? A lot of teachers don't like them because the answer is simply yes or no, right? Like, hey, do you drink tea? Yes, done, boom, right? So a lot of teachers, of course, they want their students to give like a full, complete sentence when they answer, right? But yes-no questions, when a lot of North American, British, Australian, whatever, some kind of English speaker responds, they just say yes or no. And honestly, I think that's actually okay if your students just say yes or no. A lot of the times when you're asking a yes-no question, they can quickly be used just to check for understanding, right? But if you want your students to practice effectively and give full sentences, then yes-no questions aren't so great. However, just checking for understanding, they're okay. Thinking about the or questions here, guys, or questions also can be very short, right? If somebody says to me, hey Alan, do you like tuna or salmon? Ooh, actually that's a really tough question, I'm not sure. Okay, I'm gonna think of a different one. Hey Alan, do you like tea or coffee? Okay, we'll go back to that question, right? I'd just say, yeah, coffee. It's pretty short, right? However, sometimes it does kind of force students to give a little bit of a longer answer. So, or questions are not too bad, but again, they're not super great for getting a full, complete sentence either. However, getting into C here with the WH questions, you know, if you're asking students like, hey, what do you usually drink? How long have they known each other? When are you leaving, etc. These questions kind of get students to naturally answer with a full, complete sentence, right? Not all the time, but they're usually pretty good for that, right? And that's why we call them information questions, because they get more information and they get our students to practice language effectively, right? So each type of these questions has its own purpose. Neither one is better than the other. It depends on what you're trying to do. And I think a lot of the times after you present a new word, like we talked about in the previous module, sometimes it's good to ask 3 questions, and sometimes it's a really great idea to just start with a yes-no question, check for understanding, give them an or question, try to push them to speak up a little bit more, and lastly, end with a WH question to give them some good practice, right? Okay guys, we're gonna take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to take a more detailed look at how we can use these questions more effectively. Okay guys, so we looked at the basic types of questions. Now I want to take a look at how we can use those basic question types to help us present some vocabulary. So I'm going to take a look at an example that's actually not in your book, and I'm going to write it on the board really quickly. And I want to really take a look at this one here. Made of, let's say made of plastic, made of wood, made of steel,